Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is, according to Callus, this is Teachable Tuesday. Teachable, how shall I explain? Well, I had a plan of what I wanted to talk about tonight, and there's plenty of things going on in the area that would be worth talking about. However, even though I wanted to recap the outcome of the runoffs, we split them basically, right? There's plenty of time for that. That's not going to change. However, I strongly recommend you stop whatever it is you're doing. You go and look up the Brion McClanahan show. You find episode 456, which I believe was from today. Today's episode, 456. I had to revamp the entirety of what I was going to talk about tonight after I listened to that. So if you're interested as to why and what was said and what I think about it, you're going to have to join me on the podcast. So I'll see you on the other side. Thanks. Okay, so now that I've given that teaser, that opening, hopefully you've taken the time to download and listen to Brion McClanahan, because I got to tell you, I think the guy is probably one of the smartest guys I get to listen to. And that puts him in the league of Tom Woods and Chris Ann Hall, right? Definitely got his own bent. Probably knows more about these issues, or this specific issue, than 99% of the general public, and probably the vast majority of those people that are professors at colleges, would just be my guess on that. So, the episode is titled The New Secession Crisis. Now, he goes and takes an article written by Jeremy Carl, and I'm not even going to give credit for who printed that, right? It doesn't really matter, because he tears it apart, destroys it, destroys almost everything about it, and basically takes their entirety of the guy's argument and then explains how not only is that the wrong idea, it's the result of the exact thing that you claim you don't want to do. So, Jeremy Carl is talking about how the Democrats are punishing their opponents, right? And they're using the federal system to accomplish this. So, stop what you're doing. If you haven't already listened to it, go listen to the Brion McClanahan show, episode 456. And it's kind of fresh, so I'm going to try and build off of what he talked about in that episode. Okay, so hopefully you're back and you've taken the time to listen to the episode, so much of what I'm going to say from this point forward will not make any sense at all without having listened to it. So, our friends, the nationalists, right? And I look at it as being two basic camps within nationalism, right? There are those that think the federal government should rule all and nobody should be able to do anything different. There's that kind of nationalist. And then there's the nationalists that think that there's the United States, these United States, and then there's the rest of the world. And we ought to focus on these United States first and foremost. So those nationalists, I don't have any major issues with. The nationalists that think that there is a unified, unilateral federal government that is the national government that dictates everything that goes on, that's the problem. In fact, that's actually what Lincoln was fighting for. That's what Lincoln accomplished. And he talks about how Wilson and FDR basically solidified that. And now that the reins of power are all in one party hands again, right? The people that have the opportunity to rightfully and correctly put up roadblocks and work around this are just crying like little babies, essentially, right? Instead of doing what they know they could do. And the reason why they know they could do that is the progressives have been doing it for decades. They'll take over a state. They pass a bunch of laws in that state. they alter that state, then they have their court cases, then they use the federal court case to push it upon other states. Strangely enough, when they take power in other states and they don't like existing federal law or they don't like existing state law, they change the state law or they, quote, improve the state law in the state they're in. And then they tell the feds, go pound sand. We're going to do what we want to do. And of course, they did that when their own people were running the federal government. So it was a nice kabuki theater, right? They weren't going to do anything about it. So then when the next team comes in, well, this has already been accepted. They already have their own state laws. And, we're not going to go override the state laws because there's some vestige of federalism maybe in some of our people that they don't want to take and use dictatorial means to fix what they see as a problem. So I'm going to take up I don't want to call it a taboo subject, but let's just say a subject that I don't want to get caught in the middle of at the moment. I'm just going to use it because it's the easiest one. So it used to be there were drug laws at the state level, which is the appropriate place for there to be drug laws. And those drug laws were varied, and they had different applications in different states at different times. And as time changes, they adapt and go forward. But then the feds decided that they were going to get involved. And the feds created all these whole level of federal crimes of drug laws. And they overrode what all these different states were doing. And honestly, a lot of conservatives, and I'm putting air quotes up now, conservatives, were kind of okay with that, right? I mean, they're just trying to force the good morality on everybody. Everybody needs to be on the same page. Drugs bad. You shouldn't do them. And if you do, we're going to throw you in prison. That didn't work so great for prohibition, but apparently we don't always learn our lessons. So, fast forward about, 10 years ago or so, some of the states said, well, pot, now these are the people that are in the ruling cliques of these states, and most of them are boomers or that approximate age just because that's where they're at in their lifespan and they're in power. And they think back to themselves, well, back in the 60s and 70s, I liked my pot. Pot didn't really mess me up. And, why are we doing these things to these people that smoke pot? These are silly, antiquated laws, and clearly they didn't work in the way we had hoped, and they're tossing people in prison, and we just need to reform this. We're going to go ahead and have some form of legalization. Now, that's the scenario. If I don't have it 100% accurate, please don't get lost in the details. Just follow the general rule of thumb here. And I, for one, am not making an argument that this was the right decision or saying that it was the wrong decision. I'm just laying it out there that the feds did their overreach and now a state's thinking, well, we want to do this. And the state says, well, we're going to go ahead and legalize these drugs for these purposes. And, there's the various ways. Well, we can decriminalize, we can have for medical use, we can have for, advanced medical use, whatever, and then we can just have recreational use. So there's all these various different forms of legalization. And then, of course, some states decided that, having Mary Jane legal wasn't enough, so we're going to have the next thing legal. Now, in the perfect libertarian world, everything should be legal, and the theory being is you don't throw people in jail for ingesting substances. Now, if they go and do something when they've ingested those substances, that's a different story. So that's the libertarian argument. Not going to defend that, just going to put it out there. So then you have the Republican or the conservative argument, which is drugs are bad. Drugs ruin your lives. Drugs hurt other people. Drugs have social costs to it. And because they have those social costs, we should be able to punish it. And then there's various Democrat arguments, or let's call them liberal or progressive arguments, that have varied from we want to control what you're doing and we're not going to allow you to do these things, to you can do these certain things, but if you do the rules that we say, to you can do this thing but not that thing. They're kind of all over the map. So there's basically two consistent, worldviews at play here that go anywhere from full-on legalization to absolutely not at all. So, again, not looking to take either side, just kind of trying to lay out what we're dealing with. So, Oregon and Washington basically decide to go for full legalization. Then Colorado jumps in full legalization, or maybe I've got them backwards. At this point, it doesn't really matter. Let's just say there's a half a dozen states that have full recreational marijuana use, and there's, I think, 20-some states that have some kind of form of medical marijuana. Now, we were told early on the world was going to end, that people were going to be dying in the streets, and, crime was going to go crazy, and all these other things. The reality is, some of that's true. People do act irresponsible. People do make stupid choices, particularly when they're inebriated, right? So we understand that. We know that's what it is. Yet, as long as they're not hurting somebody else, kind of tolerate it, right? So, as time has gone on, and this is really the crux to the situation, as time has gone on, more and more states have decided, we're going to do this, and we don't care what the Fed's going to say or do. And they get away with it. And it leads me to wonder, why does our side not do this? I mean, we pass these token Second Amendment sanctuary cities, or Second Amendment sanctuary counties, or pro-life counties, or anti-abortion cities, or not really. We really don't. And we certainly don't enforce it. And we do these half-hearted things, and we just are disappointing, right? The leftists, they're fearless. They will put forth all their stuff, and they stick by their guns. And we lose one court case, and we tuck our tail behind our legs and run the other way. So, back to the argue of nullification and secession, right? So, we don't necessarily want to secede. We don't think that worked out so great last time. But every time you bring up states' rights, you get thrown in your face that you want slavery or some other crazy thing. Nobody argues for that. Come on, get over yourself. We have selective states that have looser drug laws. You can hate drugs or you can love drugs, but at least if you love drugs, you can go to this state. If you hate drugs, you can go to that state. And there's a difference of localities and difference of how those states are run. And you can see whether or not it's a good outcome or a bad outcome, which is what part of the original design was, right? Part of the original design was to allow for there to be some different thoughts. So Vermont forever had what we would now call constitutional carry, but for the better part of a decade, it was referred to as Vermont carry, right? No restrictions on firearms that could be carried pretty much anywhere. Now, again, there's the kind of the libertarian view on this. There's the conservative view on this. And the progressive view, again, is generally all over the map. But you say you want to respect private property rights, but if I am not my own property and I choose to carry something, as long as I'm not causing a problem for somebody else, I don't really see how that's any of their business, what I have on me. I mean, we carve up these exceptions where you can't carry a firearm. It's really not constitutional carry. It's certainly not Vermont carry. Now, a conscientious person would say, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Business Owner, Mr. Hotel. My uncle, hey, you don't want me to carry a firearm? Okay, that's fine. That's cool. I'll leave it in the car, or I just won't bring it with me. People are gracious, right? People want to look after their family, their friends, their community. That doesn't change the fact that there are also that we're all fallen people, and some of those fallen people are worse than others, and some of those people actually do want to go hurt people and do want to cause problems. And that's why most of us want to carry firearms. Never mind the fact that the whole purpose of the Second Amendment was to defend against tyranny. Yet, the states that pass these laws, they don't do a very good job of enforcing them. For instance, in Kansas, they passed a law that said if you should make a suppressor in the state of Kansas, and if you should sell it to somebody else in the state of Kansas, that was intra-state commerce, and federal laws do not apply. Yet when the feds came in, the sheriff didn't say, hey, sorry, I'm not going to help you here. That's not anything I'm going to enforce, nor are you. The DA didn't say, hey, you know what, that's not a law here, we're not going to oppose it. No, they let the feds come in and do their thing. And rather than the attorney general of the state, who should have been standing up to defend his citizens of his state's rights, they just cuckolded under and let the feds abuse those people. Now, I'm fairly certain, had that been drugs in California, California would have defended them. Yet, the quote-unquote conservatives did nothing. Oh, and the court told us we can't do that. And they keep using this silly term, the court ruled. Well, no, courts don't rule. They issue opinions. Rulers rule, and judges aren't rulers, as Chris Ann Hall often refers to that. And I just don't understand why we tolerate this half-hearted, quasi-conservative knuckling under to federal authority. If we're a sovereign state, be it Texas or Florida or even Wisconsin, and we pass a law and we say we're going to do this, the feds have no business interfering with that. The feds have no authority unless the Constitution granted them that authority. And I know, there's some of you out there, the federal supremacists, the judicial supremacists, you're going to say that if they get involved and they make a rule, the Constitution says those federal rules or those federal laws are supreme. Well, no, actually, that's not what it says. And if the state of Texas were to say tomorrow, for instance, all abortion's illegal in the state of Texas, they could take them to court as many times as they want. And as long as somebody that had, let's call it the intestinal fortitude, that was the governor or the lieutenant governor or the AG, would just say, yeah, that's fine, but this is our law in this state, and we're choosing to enforce it. Now, we're going to offer them options, right? So if you kill your baby, rather than throw you in prison, we might just deport you. We can send you over to Kansas. We can send you to California. We can send you to New York. We can send you over to Mexico. But you can't stay in Texas. You're a baby killer. And I know that there's some court case out there where the court issued an opinion that it cannot be permanent. Okay, make it for 99 years. You killed your baby. You're not fit to live in Texas society. Now, you can go ahead and have your little exceptions that make up a whopping, 1.5 to 2% of all the abortions committed. And even though I strongly believe two wrongs don't make a right, and even though I think that that's a strawman argument, I grant you that just to shut you up. So the 98% of those people that go out and kill their babies for primarily convenience reasons, you can do that, but then you can leave. I hear that New Jersey is very beautiful this time of year. I hear Virginia loves people that kill their babies. I hear New York's very open to that. And I'd even go so far as to say is, as part of your sentence, we will provide you the money to move, because we're going to sell everything that you have here because you've now forfeited it because you're found to be a felon, and we're going to take all your stuff, we'll sell it, and whenever we run and get back, after we pay off your court costs, we'll give you that money so you can go relocate in that other state. I don't know why that wouldn't work. And really, what are the feds going to do about it? Sovereign state of Texas, that's what we want to do. All we have to do is put our foot down, tell them this is the border of the state of Texas. We are sovereign, and you have no authority here. Or better yet, and I know that I have a lot of friends that are really concerned, that we're going to legalize all the drugs. Okay, so Another friend of mine said, well, let's do this. You get caught selling drugs, we'll send you to California. We'll give you a bus ride to California. We'll send you your stuff, and you can go spend the next 20 years in California. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing. That way I don't have to pay and house you in the state of Texas. I don't train you to become a better criminal here in the state of Texas. We're just sending you somewhere else. You can go serve your term. And now, if you get caught back in the state of Texas before your term is over, well, that's another story. Now you're trespassing, right? So, I mean, there are ways that this could be dealt with. Tomorrow, the state can say, we are going to allow for people to make their own suppressors. And we encourage people to make and use suppressors because it will protect your hearing. Logical sense, right? You're going to go use your rifles. They're loud. You can damage your hearing. So you put a suppressor on it so you can go, practice fire them. If they're made in the state of Texas and they don't leave the state of Texas, there's really no federal reason to be involved in that. And if the feds should show up and want to get involved in that, they get greeted by the Texas Rangers that remind them, hey, guess what? You're in the sovereign state of Texas. You have no authority here for that. There's the door. Oh, if you want to deal with drug mules and human trafficking, we're happy to assist. In fact, we've got a number of sheriffs here that already run an operation where they cover most of the Metroplex. And we would highly encourage you to work with them on that. Oh, but yeah, no. We're not going to assist you in any kind of arrests for people that happen to have suppressors. Well, oh, yes, you're right. If they commit another crime, well, that's a different story now because they're guilty of that other crime, right? Not guilty, but caught in the commission thereof, right? So that might be something entirely different, but it's not the same thing. Again, this all boils down to is the right, the conservatives, the Republicans refuse to have the stones to stand up to the feds. They refuse to recognize that there's a sovereign state in Texas, that there's a sovereign state in Alabama, and Louisiana, and New Mexico, and Oklahoma, and Arkansas, right? These are all sovereign states. They get to make their own rules. They get to decide what's the way they want to live there. And you know what? If people don't like it there, they'll leave. I mean, it's no surprise to me over the last year or so that people have been moving to Texas, even though Greg Abbott really did a bad job for 6 or 8 months, or however long that really was. It's still so much better than California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois. Do I need to go on? I don't think so. Or Florida, for that matter. Florida basically said, yeah, we're done with this stuff a long time ago. The states have this power. The problem is, and here's the catch, the same people that are afraid to stand up for these state sovereign rights are the same people that are more or less defending governors that have abused their power. Governors that used emergency orders to basically violate the Texas state constitution or their own state constitution or the federal constitution, right? The U.S. Constitution. They violated a whole bunch of rights, and those people get to keep their jobs. Those people will probably get to serve another term in many states. Those people will go right on abusing their citizens, and our people are defending them. Not entirely, but enough of them are. They're making excuses. They're defending it. And, what's really odd is, this is another case of D versus R, right? Well, the Democrats hate it when an R is doing it, and the R's hate it when the D's doing it. But the reality is they're wrong. If that abuse of power is wrong, it's wrong. It doesn't matter who's abusing the power, it's wrong. So whether it's the feds abusing their power on the state level or the states abusing their power within the state, they're wrong. Now, my friends, this is the crux of the point. The people that have R's after their names, the people that claim to be conservatives, they're always the first to knuckle. They're always the first to give in. You don't see Democrats running and playing in hiding. You don't see Democrats caving because the feds told them so. No, they fight. And if they lose one battle, they show back up to 3 more places and carry on with that battle. Whereas our quote-unquote conservative friends refuse to do the same. They complain about lawfare. They complain about, the strategy being employed to change the laws. Well, it would make sense if we would adopt a similar strategy, or if we would fight back in a similar way. This is an asymmetric war for control of our country. And right now, all the major battles have been won by the other side. We still hold more territory. We still have more population. We still are right. But we have to show people we're right. We have to convince them we're right. And we have to fight like we're right. We have to not be ashamed. We have to not run away. We have to not cave in. We have to not act like little children. Losing a battle is not losing the war. Losing a war is a temporary setback. You may remember that it took 4 attempts before Rome was able to take out Carthage permanently. You may remember that the Peloponnesians, or the Greeks, fought amongst themselves for decades. You may remember that the Persians tried to invade Greece not once but twice. You may remember that historically, what doesn't get finished the first time comes back some more. If we're not going to fight the good fight, win, lose, or draw, and then pick up and be ready for the next fight, we're never going to win. You lose every battle you don't show up for. And that's what we're not doing. We're not showing up. Or if we do, we show up half-heartedly. Brion McClanahan, in my opinion, perfectly describes where we're at and why we're there. And we as Republicans, we as conservatives, keep lionizing the very man that started the problem and made it worse by succeeding generations, by building upon the federal edifice that he helped create. And until we can jettison that, until we can realize the mistake, I think we're going to be doomed to failure. I think we're going to keep fighting the same battle that we've already lost. I think that we're going to be continually ineffective in spreading liberty, in selling freedom to those that want it. We're going to be wholly overmatched in every battle we go to when we go running to the feds, because they're not on our side. They were never on our side. And even when our president's in there and we have the Congress, they're still not on our side. And the sooner that conservatives, Christians, Republicans, however you want to label yourself, figure that out, the better off we're going to be. Now, Brion McClanahan's tagline is, think locally, act locally. And honestly, he's not wrong. We've been dealing with that same issue for several years here in Collin County, right? We're quote-unquote the reddest county in the reddest state. Not really. When you look at the outcome of these municipal elections, we got our moderates selling us out. We got the conservatives doing really not an awesome job of putting forth great candidates. And then we have the progressives just pushing through and pushing forward. And every seat they win, they create more division and more challenges that need to be overcome. They're winning because we're not showing up to the battle. And when we show up to the battle, we're unprepared. And as someone that ran a race that, quite frankly, I never expected to win, I can tell you that's not easy. It's a challenge. I can tell you that going forward, there's going to be opportunities for candidates. There's going to be opportunities to support those candidates. But you have to think long and hard of the investment of time, money, and effort into that. And if you wish to support these people, it really matters. It makes a huge difference. Every person that runs needs at least a core team of about 10 people to back them up and help them out. And it really 50 to 100 people that are willing to go do work. It's a challenge. It's a commitment. If you say you care, If you say you want to make a difference, all I have to say is put your money where your mouth is. This is your opportunity going forward. You see what happens when you don't show up. You know what happens when you show up unprepared. You have an opportunity. You have a whole year to be prepared for the next cycle. Use that time wisely. Thinking locally, acting locally, and remember what you've learned from Brion McClanahan. And as I run across more of these stunning episodes from the various people that I deal with, I'll be sure to pass that along and add my few cents to it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good evening. This is and was According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.